All right, thanks for bearing with us. We're trying to do multiple things here and really meet multiple needs. I'm Barb Shafer. I'm an AEA team rep, served in that capacity for quite a while. The last few years, I've also worked with Ed Services as a literacy consultant. So both of those hats really have helped me come to understand and be a part of this Eli work. And I have Andrea Raber with me today as well, my fellow Eli buddy, who is a team rep, school psychologist by trade. Okay, a little bit of background about why the two of us are up here. First of all, Andrea Raber and I served as external coaches for Phase 1 schools last year. Okay, so about 10% of the schools in Iowa were agreed to become Phase 1 schools to kind of pilot some of these universal screening tools. We'll be talking about the FAST assessments and the ADs. They got to do ADs last year as well. So we were trained last year in FAST assessments and served in the capacity as Mason City's external coach as they implemented the assessments and the larger work of MTSS. As a result of being part of a Phase 1 school, we were awarded the opportunity to travel across the state of Iowa this summer and train the next huge round of schools on the assessments that they were to receive as a part of some early literacy implementation legislation that was passed. Okay, so we found ourselves in a position of traveling across the state of Iowa, teaching these assessment tools to over 70% of the schools in Iowa. In fact, almost 90% of the schools in Iowa now are using FAST assessments. And that's part of the reason we are here today, is because we've been a part of this work. And we said early on this summer in the car, we're like, you know what? Everybody in the AEA needs to know about these assessments. They need to know about Eli. They need to know about MTSS, have some level of awareness. Others need more. But we felt strongly that the team reps really needed to know about Eli. They were going to be asked questions. They're in the buildings and so forth. And because of that, the team reps in the room have already listened through this presentation. In fact, we spent about 3 hours giving you guys the full overview of Eli, FAST, and TIER. Joe has also presented to the Ed Service staff as well as the Infotech staff. But again, we wanted to even broaden that out more and make sure that everybody in this agency has some awareness of this, monster called Eli. So if you get questions about Eli, we want you to know what that means and what that stands for. That being said, we will look at the outcomes for a little bit of time here today. So we really just want you to understand what the early literacy implementation law is and what it means for all districts in Iowa. To do that, we really do need to give you just a little assessment literacy 101. Okay, because I want you to be able to leave and know what FAST assessments can be used for and are designed for, and what they can't. Okay? And we're just going to be really quick overview. Again, we spent 2 days this summer training districts on this and really have cut that short for you all. It really is an overview, just informational awareness. But we want you to have an idea of what these FAST suite of assessments consist of, as well as we're flexible.
This is more than we bargained for.
Yeah. We were getting into right here and all. So the FAST is the suite of assessments. A lot of acronyms. Eli, FAST, TIER. Schools are using these. Everyday conversations now. We want you to have an awareness of what they mean. So the FAST is the suite of assessments. The TIER database is huge, but for the purposes of FAST, it's where teachers go, administrators go, team reps go, SLPs can go, like Kim was saying, and get results of those FAST assessments. Quickly see what % of kids are on target for meeting end of the year reading benchmarks. Okay, so those are the things we want to give you an overview of today, knowing that some of you are a lot further in your learning than others. To do that, though, we want to really start big, okay? When we were trained with phase 1 schools a year ago, the DE purposely went small to go big and really worked hard at keeping it to about 10% of the schools to scale it up eventually. And that 10% of schools, those phase 1 schools such as Mason City, Hampton, Cedar Heights Elementary, East Marshall, I believe, and others, got the whole package, okay? They got the assessments, they got the FAST and the tier, but they also got this really good MTSS framework consisting of a facilitation guide with D2 questions and so forth. So all about systems change and looking to see how healthy your core, your universal instruction is. And if it isn't, what do we do then? So this really full comprehensive package that we were a part of and helping Mason City work through and doing really good work. Well, then this legislation was passed and money was put toward it, and Eli came into play, and the floodgates opened. And all the schools had to have access to the assessments, not just the next gradual amount, that percentage they were going to add year 2. But even though we did just the 2-day trainings this summer on the assessments, on the FAST and the tier, we try to always have a little bit of that big picture look and give that big picture look to schools. In that, you have to remember, Eli, it has mandated the testing, okay? They mandated the testing. You're going to see what the requirements are for schools, but they shouldn't lose sight of the big idea in that. And the big idea is that you do the good work of MTSS, also known as RTI, and other names throughout the years. But the whole goal is that we have robust universal instruction at the tier, universal tier, core instruction, so we have a healthy system. We want about 80% of our kids, and Joe's been telling us for years, and it makes good sense, we want about 80% of our kids successful with core instruction, and then we can handle. We're equipped to handle the ones that need a little more. A big part of this is universal screening, and this is where the FAST and tier come in. We want to find the kids that are at risk for not being successful in the area of reading. FAST is a strong predictive tool. It will tell us very easily, efficiently, who is not on target, and those are the kids we need to find early and fix early. Find the trouble and help them fix it early. Also a big part of MTSS are evidence-based instructional interventions at those targeted and intensive levels. Okay? A lot of this stuff the DE is working on and they're in the process of releasing. They can't release it soon enough for us. But again, much a part of MTSS. The whole idea of progress monitoring and your FAST assessments and tier database are good helps for that as well. And it could, of course, good database-based decision-making in general. We've got to know what we can, know the data we can use to make decisions. All right, so here's where we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the legislation itself. And this is where you want to have a look at your fact sheet. Joe, Andrea, and I did this Eli training this summer, and so we've had a lot of conversations and have presented to different audiences, and Joe's always so good. He went ahead and created this for us. And I tell everybody, this is kind of your cheat sheet for the larger Eli document. I'll show you how to access later. But this is the nitty-gritty, what you need to be aware of, because it's directly what impacts school, students, and you'll see some things that will impact you in your job. All right, so the first big idea is universal screening. And so if you want to look at bullet number 1 or number 1 on your fact sheet, and just look at that quickly. But the idea here is all kids will be screened using a DE-approved screener 3 times a year. Fall, winter, spring. All kids. All kids, kindergarten through 3rd grade. Okay? Right now the law is K-3. Some schools like Mason City are doing K-6 because the FAST assessments go up through 6th grade and so forth, but the law is K-3. Okay? Unless it's a student on an IEP who has been denoted as needing Iowa alternate assessment. Those kids are not screened. Everyone else is. Okay? So that's the first big idea. And you'll see in the guidance documents, here's a screenshot. And on the DE website, under early literacy implementation, there are a wealth of resources. But you'll see that the FAST met the cut for a DE-approved screener and progress monitoring tool. Schools do not have to use FAST, but they have to use something for universal screening and progress monitoring that's been approved by the DE, and you can see with those assessments here. Most schools, and we've talked to a lot of them this summer, because DIBELS, a lot of schools use DIBELS, and DIBELS is approved except at kindergarten. And we had a lot of schools in phase 1. Yes, I gotta go get one. I need to do too much detail. Anyway, most schools are abandoning what they used before for screening and going with FAST because it's been provided by the DE and it fits the bill and it fits the bill well. So what you need to know that schools are mandated K-3 to administer universal screening 3 times a year with a DE-approved screener. All right, second point is about progress monitoring. Students who are at risk of not being proficient in reading, we call it, they come out in red after they take the screener. They're gonna get a score, a benchmark, and they'll either be red or green. Green, on target, looking like they're gonna be proficient at the end of the year. Red, oh, red flag, we need to do something to ruin that prediction. We want them to be successful at the end of the school year. If those kids come out, even fall benchmark time in the red, they need to have progress monitoring done weekly. Okay? Big implications for schools. Big implications for schools. So talking about defining what puts a student at risk of having a substantial deficit in reading, or actually having a substantial deficit in reading, those are the 2 levels of risk. And different things come into play depending upon which a student has been defined as. So you can see the information here. Basically, Andrea and I defined it. It's easiest to think of it as this. A student is at risk for having a substantial deficiency in reading if they score below benchmark or come out in the red once. Okay? If they score once in the red, and the next testing window they score in the red again, they're considered to have a substantial deficit in reading. Okay? Different, and it's important that you know, are they at risk or do they have a substantial deficit, because different portions of the law and requirements for school come into effect depending upon how they're classified. So here's a screenshot, and it's a little hard to see, but it lays out about every option there can be for testing in the red or the green. So if you're in the red just once, at risk, in the red 2 times in a row, substantial deficit. And it shows you how you have to get off being at risk. The thing to remember here is this law came into effect August 1st, 2014. So our phase 1 schools last year didn't worry about any of this. Okay, this came into play this August. But what this helps to illustrate is fall testing window, winter testing window, spring testing window. It doesn't reset in the fall. Okay, so in the spring, if you were red for the first time, and then in the fall, the next school year, you were in the red, now you have a substantial deficit in reading. It does not reset one year to the next. It carries through. Okay. This is really a good summary table, and it's something I would bring your attention to and revisit as questions come up in your district. Here are all the different, really this is the nitty-gritty of the law, the implications for schools. So if you look at the vertical column first, we have universal screening.
If you're looking for it in your handout, it's after number 4 in your handout. If you want to see it a little better.
So you've got universal screening, progress monitoring, instruction, and parent notice. Those are all components of the Eli law. So the first one, and then we go across the top, students who are appropriately progressing. Those are the kids who score in the green. They scored above the benchmark for their grade level, their time of the year. The middle column has to do with those at risk. They scored once in the red. And the last one on the right is substantial deficit. They scored in the red twice in a row. Okay? So, universal screening, I've already said, all kids, 3 times a year, K-3, unless they're on what? Exactly, okay? And we have a lot of conversations about this, and schools do as well. They say, why do I test my kids on IEPs? I said, I know this is designed to kind of sort and separate, and we already know they're at risk, but the law says all students, okay? All students. Progress monitoring. Now here's where you need to pay attention to. First row, kids in green, we do nothing different. Progress monitoring weekly isn't required, but the first time a student doesn't meet the benchmark is in red. The law is saying progress monitoring, monitor weekly using a DE-approved screener. And the tiered database system will let you assign intervention and progress monitor weekly, right within the database. It is also required for students who have substantial deficit, meaning they've scored in the red twice. Okay? Implications for schools. Schools are acting on this part of the law right now, and there's a lot yet to be ironed out. The next component of the law is about instruction, intense instruction. So typically progressing kids, scoring in the green, nothing different. Universal tier instruction suffices. We're happy. Kids scoring in the red once, additional intensive instruction is recommended, but not required. For in red, have to progress monitor and just recommended that they have that intensified instruction. However, if they're at, been termed substantial deficit, 2 reds in a row, it's required. Okay. Further guidance in the Eli document about what that instruction should consist of. One of the last nitty-gritties and components for school requirements is this idea of parental notice. So we do this universal screening 3 times a year, and kid scores in the green. It's the district-wide policy, whatever you typically do. I know my daughter just was tested. She scored in the green. Wonderful. I got a notice. Don't have to, but a lot of schools are saying, hey, we're going to let everybody know how their student did, whether they're in red or green. Student scores in red once, they're at risk. Notice specific to performance on that screening and any services to be provided is recommended. It would make sense. You would let the parents know your kid didn't meet the benchmark. Here's what we plan to do. A little bit more in regard to parent notice when they have substantial deficits. Not only do you let them know of their progress, you need to let them know the services you're going to be providing, that intensive instruction, as well as recommended strategies and progress they're making, that progress monitoring weekly component. Good news is parental notice. Iowa Reading Research Center has developed some form letters. That's what Carly got home in the mail, my daughter. Form letter to help schools do that. They're also developing parental strategies and so forth. Okay? So you just need to realize that these are the things that schools are dealing with right now and ironing out how to get these into their day-to-day practices. All right. You also have, I'm just going to have you look very briefly, main points 3. 3 is about that intensive instruction that gives you a little bit of an idea of what that might consist of. 4 is all about that notice to parents. And there's the table we had up here earlier. 5 is kind of a hot topic and was ever since this legislation came into play, and that's the component starting in May of 2017 that if they're not proficient by the end of 3rd grade, they'll have to have a summer school, attend summer school, or be retained unless they meet a good cause exemption. Good cause exemptions are further defined here, okay, in the overall guidance document. So that's big idea number 5. And then 6 gets into the retention if they didn't attend summer school, and it lists some of the good cause exemptions. And then 7 is about ensuring system-wide continuous improvement in reading proficiency. This has to do more specifically with school districts having to report certain things on their SIPs and school APRs and so forth, okay? It's into a lot of detail we're not gonna cover today. So that's really the nitty-gritty, the cliff notes, so to speak, of this Eli document. I just want to tell you that it's been updated 3 times already. The newest edition is August 26th of this year. If you want to know more about Eli, go to the DE website, do the A to Z index by E, early literacy implementation. That's where you'll find this document as well as more than you'd ever want to know about Eli. There's a lot of good information there.
Just another FYI, I just uploaded that document, the other document that Barb showed, this handout that you have, and then we have a 1-page fast sheet, and I put those all on today's leadership page, so they're there.
Because this is what we told team reps, that fact sheet you have, that should really be something they go back to as they get asked questions regarding Eli. You also want to pay attention, there is a specific section about special education Q&A, okay? Questions that arise particular to special ed. All right, real quick assessment literacy 101, and then we'll get to the nitty-gritty of the assessments. All right, and we do this, we laugh, we do this for Joe, but it really is necessary. My biggest thing here is we don't want people in districts, teachers and staff saying things about FAST that FAST isn't designed to do or shouldn't be used to do. Okay, so you just need kind of a basic understanding of what it can do and what it can't. And like Joe says, bigger than FAST, good MTSS database decision making. Decisions require questions. We don't just give tests to give tests. We want to answer a question. Assessments need to serve a purpose, and we need to be clear, like I said, about what that purpose is. And once I give an assessment, I need a comparison to know whether or not that kid's in the red or green. How significant isn't it? Okay? This is a really nice slide that Joe came up with this summer that fit our FAST training purposes. You have the 4 different types of assessment, 4 different questions you can answer. And the first is who has needs? Who is on target to be proficient by the end of the year when it comes to reading, and who isn't? FAST is very, very predictive. The research is there, they've done their work. If a student scores in the red in FAST assessment, they probably will not be proficient on the end of the year outcome, get Iowa assessment or whatever. So our job is to, as Joe says, ruin that prediction. Okay, know it now and do something about it. So FAST serves that purpose extremely well. Then what are the students' needs? So more diagnostic. FAST does not do this. It doesn't say it's diagnostic, it is not. You can get a little bit of information by listening to a kid read, but it is not set up to be diagnostic. You would need a BRI or running record or something, some kind of comprehension measure to truly be diagnostic and pinpoint exactly what the student is struggling with in the area of reading. It is good for the next one. Is our instruction working? It is chosen as a DE-approved progress monitoring tool because it is very sensitive to growth over time and done weekly with the probes provided. It will let you know if the instruction you're providing is making a difference. Okay, so very strong use there. The other thing it has a little bit of capability to do is answer how well did it work, that outcome, that summative assessment. Only in that you can say, and Basin City, Central Springs is doing this right now, fall testing window, a lot of them are done. What percentage of our 4th graders scored in the green? Okay, I can look at winter. Okay, what percentage of my 4th graders now scored in the green? Or I can look from beginning of the year to the end of the year. So you can answer some general questions in that regard, making progress over time in groups of kids, but its primarily 2 purposes are for screening and progress monitoring. And I'm just gonna have this slide up there. We're running out of time for this section, but reasons why it was chosen as a good screening measure and a good progress monitoring measure. And again, like I said, it's not primarily set up to be an outcome or summative assessment, but administrators are kind of looking at that building-wide, district-wide lens. The last thing I'm going to talk about in our Exciting Assessment Literacy 101 section is the idea of comparisons, okay? What you guys need to know, because I've already had people ask me this. Okay, Barb, this kid scored this on FAST. Tell me what percentile they scored at. Not going to happen, okay? FAST is criterion referenced. There is not a table to convert it to a percentile rank, a standard score, whatever. It's simply telling you they either met the benchmark or didn't. Okay, so there is no conversion chart. It's simply separating, sorting. Who do we need to give a little more attention to because they're at risk for not being proficient in the area of reading, and who can we kind of see that is pretty much on track. So I think that's the big takeaway there. Students can also kind of do a comparison to self over time. All right, anything else that I didn't cover with that part? Andrea's going to talk to you next a little bit, just give you an overview of what the assessments themselves look like.
Okay, if you are following along on your fact sheet, the pages aren't numbered, but if they were, it'd be page 3, where I'm at, in the middle of the page.
Something Joe didn't do.
Joe didn't number the pages. See, we can blame him for things too.
We spent a lot of time with Joe this summer, so he
and actually, I'm going to say this part for Joe's benefit, even though he isn't here. This is the screen that tells you what FAST stands for. Because a lot of times people say, what does that even mean? And it's the Formative Assessment System for Teachers. And Joe usually gets on his soapbox and goes on and on and on about how he hates the fact that it says formative assessment in the name because it's not a formative assessment. And teachers will then think, oh, I'm doing formative assessment because I give the FAST test. So it's not a formative assessment, but that's in the name. They didn't ask Joe when they named it, which is shocking. Maybe
he would have told us.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the FAST suite of assessments is what they call it, and that's because there's a whole collection of assessments that are included. Some general features of the FAST assessments is that it's research-based, and the Department of Ed has done a lot of research and study on the best assessments that will give the best predictive ability and the best assessments that follow typical developmental reading progress. So I know a lot of times the schools have some questions about why these tests and why this and why that. They should just feel good that the department has done a lot of work on that, and it's sound research-based measures.
They sold us.
It's browser-based, so it's off of Chrome, an internet browser. There's online administration, so the student has paper in front of them. The teacher is scoring on the computer. It's right, they score right online. The results go right into the system. Online scoring, there's online training, there's certification and practice that are all built into the system, so the teachers can just go right there, one stop, and they have everything. They enter their results right away, and bam, it goes in the system, and they know right away how the student has done. So, a little bit about, there's kind of 2 different features to the suite of assessments, and the first one is what's called the CBM style assessments, and that includes early reading for kindergarten and 1st grade, and CBM reading for 2nd through 6th is what it can be used for, but the law requires 2nd and 3rd. And this is one option that schools have within the FAST suite of assessments. If you look on page 3 of the fact sheet, the FAST early reading, it lists the measures there. There's some timed measures and some open-ended measures for kindergarten and 1st grade. In a few minutes, we'll get to a slide that shows what assessments are given at what benchmarks, but just to kind of have a list of what assessments are given. Letter names, letter sounds, nonsense words, sentence reading are all timed measures. They're 1 minute in length. And then there's 3 open-ended measures, which through their research, they've determined that being fast at these measures are not important. The amount of time it takes the student to complete these is unlimited. You just want to know what they know in those areas, and that's concepts of print, onset sounds, and word segmenting. And we will get into, in just a minute, just a brief look at what those look like. The other option then within the FAST suite of assessments is called A-reading, and this is a computer adaptive test. If any of you are familiar with the MAPS testing, NWEA MAPS testing that's done, it's very similar to the MAPS testing in that it's computer adaptive. As the student answers the questions, if they get the questions right, they're bumped up to harder questions, and if they get the questions wrong, it bumps them down to lower level questions.
So they are on the computer then, and they're doing it all at once, maybe in a computer lab with headphones, and they're read the directions or some information. Yep.
And this is another option. Schools are only required to give one screening measure, and they could do either the A-reading or the FAST CBM style assessments. A lot of districts are choosing to do both. And as we're seeing the results in the fall, it seems like doing both might be a good idea because they're getting different results based on if they're doing on the A-reading or the same students using the FAST assessment. And in order to determine if they're at risk or substantially deficit, it's just based on being in the red in one of those, or being in the green on one of those. If they're green on the FAST assessment or if they're green on the A-reading, they're considered to be on track. But if they are red on one, then they can use other information to determine.
A lot of schools are just doing FAST for screening. A-reading is approved for screening, but not progress monitoring. So that also adds some information in their decision making. Some schools that have a hard time understanding how CBM assessments and reading fluency do correlate with reading comprehension like to get the A-reading because it's directly assessing comprehension. They read and answer questions. So that's a reason some schools are giving both.
And in comparison to the MAPS assessments, the A-reading actually starts in kindergarten,
Kindergarten,
whereas the MAPS doesn't go that low, and so some schools are deciding, do we continue to do the MAPS or we just do the A-reading? So I'll get to try that out. Okay, so like Barb said, just a quick brief universal screening, the A-reading, the early reading, the CBM reading, those are all approved as universal screening measures. Now the progress monitoring measures that are required by the law, the early reading and the CBM reading are approved for these purposes. There is not progress monitoring on the A-reading. So the A-reading is only used as a universal screening measure. Okay, you have this chart in your handout. Actually, I'm going to go to your handout for a minute just so you can see briefly. Page 4. Starting on page 4, you just get a quick screenshot of each one of the assessments in case you were curious to know. Since none of you will be giving the assessments, you don't need to know in depth about what they are and what the scoring procedures are or anything like that, but it gives a brief screenshot. So it starts with letter naming, letter sounds. It gives a little bit of information on the side in case you're curious to know what those are about. Most of them we're fairly familiar with. A lot of them are similar to what we've done in our AEA CBM,
Dibbles
or Dibbles work. So just there for your reference if you'd like to look at that. Sentence reading on the next page is one that's a little different than what we're familiar with. It's basically a CBM reading passage that is broken down into smaller chunks. It starts with just one sentence, and then as you flip the page, it goes to more sentences, and it's always paired with a picture. So it's just used in
first grade fall.
Yep. Just to kind of like a gateway to the CBM reading passages. The concepts of print is the next one, and that one has some interesting scoring in that you lay the paper down in front of the student a certain direction and upside down, and the first item of the test is, are they able to flip it over and orient the page correctly so that they can read what's on the page.
Kindergarten fall only.
And then onset sounds is the next one, which is very similar to Dibble's measures. And the last one is word segmenting, where they're taking a word and breaking it apart. So the chart up on the slide here and in your handout shows you at each benchmark in kindergarten and first grade which assessments are given. And then you get a composite score based on those 4 assessments, and there's a weighting system to the level at which each assessment feeds into the composite score. And the at-risk and substantial deficit, meeting the benchmark or not, is based on the composite score. So this is kindergarten and first grade, and then from then on, 2nd through 6th, it's CBM reading passages. And if you go in your handout, you can see an example. It's 3 one-minute passages, and they get the median score of words read per minute. An accuracy score also appears, but there's not benchmarks for accuracy. There's benchmarks for words per minute. And so that is actually winter of first grade through 6th grade for the CBM. If you go to the next page on your handout, you can see an example of what a reading looks like. The student puts headphones on and it'll read the directions to them, and then they might have to, in the earlier items, they might just have to click on an item or click on a letter or click on a word, and then they gradually get harder where they're having to read sentences, and then going on to paragraphs, and then finally whole passages that they read online, and then they might have anywhere from 1 to like 5 questions they have to answer based on that passage. This next graphic just shows what the Department of Education recommends as far as the options for progress monitoring. So if you're in kindergarten, they recommend letter sounds, and if you're in first grade, it's CBM reading, but then they give other options also. So as schools are planning what they're going to use for progress monitoring, as the fall window is closing on October 10th, which is a week from today. So after next Friday, they should have an idea of which students are at risk, and they should be beginning to implement some progress monitoring and figuring out what tools they're going to use and how they're going to do that.
Another acronym.
Okay, so I'm moving away from the FAST, and now I'm moving into the tier. And we really tried to make this easy to understand for schools this summer, because there's so many acronyms and they were getting them all confused. The Iowa tier is the software system that the Department of Education has provided as a tool for schools to assist them in implementing MTSS and organizing and housing all of their data and information. So it's a software system that soon, sounds like Kim said, the team reps will be getting access to, and anyone else that needs to, so they can reference the school data also. The interesting thing about the tier is that they're hoping to be able to add more features as they go, and at some point are hoping that the IEP and the IFSP will be connected in through the tier. It connects with the student information system in the schools. That's how the student names get fed into the system, which is a whole complicated, I don't really understand procedure, and I'm glad I don't have to. So
The tech folks
just know that the tech people know.
But it's pretty amazing the way it works.
And then it provides instant access. So when they go to give this assessments, what they call punch out to the FAST system. They give the assessments, and then it automatically feeds into the tier system, and in real time, automatically you can go to the tier system and see exactly how that student scored, and the tier system allows you to run reports based on classroom data. There's also a summary report section that should be coming back soon. It was there for a while last year, and it'll be back, where you can look at the school's data compared to other schools within the district. If they have multiple elementary schools, you can compare the school's data to the AEA data and to the state data. Lots of ways to compare the data, and that's all housed in the tier system. This is kind of a visual organizer that, as we talked this summer, and I don't know, did Joe come up with this too? Of course. This is kind of a visual organizer of all these acronyms and how it all fits together. So you have the Iowa Education Portal, which you have to have an ANA account to access. And through that, you might get Iowa School Alerts. That's also where the Iowa tier system is housed. That's where you would go to get into Ed Insight. and the I have a plan. I have a plan is also all housed in that education portal. And then underneath the tier, you have universal screening, progress monitoring, one-click reports, certification, and the tier support site are all within there.
Which actually, the support site, we visit a lot. I hate to admit that, but the question mark, that's where to go to get information, handouts, online learning opportunities, and so forth. So that's a direction.
A knowledge base with links to the Iowa Reading Research Center and all kinds of good resources for districts. All right.
Just two more slides. What we would say, just kind of as an aside, is we were a part of this last year with Mason City. Now we've been a part of it with some other schools this year. I know my school, I'm a team rep, did their screening here a few weeks ago. The teachers pick up on it quickly, and it does really go pretty smoothly, and they like it. They like it that unlike Dibbles where you have to hand score and calculate and transfer, they like how quickly you see the data and how it's disaggregated, and so it really has been pretty smooth and gone well. That being said, we wanted to get this information out to you all, but we also thought everybody needs to know not only about Eli, tier, FAST, and so forth, but what is your role in it and what isn't your role? So we thought it was very important, and it has held the same for all groups we've presented to. And so you can kind of see the breakdown there. And I won't read that to you. But then we wanted to kind of have you consider for just a minute, started really big, gave you an overview, but start thinking about, and this is where we do like a 30-second, 60-second question or open it up to the group, direct implications for you in your specific job, whether you're in SLP, OT, PT, team rep, and so forth. And something we thought of for SLPs, and they trained us on previously, is you might have a kid on IP for SLP services taking a screener. You may want to be present when that student is tested, as you know that student's speech best and are able to help the assessor know whether or not they answered correctly or incorrectly, based on their speech deficit and so forth. We talked a little bit about OTs maybe needing to get involved if students are taking a reading and they need some sort of accommodation in the way of the computer and how they operate the computer. I guess the other thing we would leave you with and let you know is that we have all kinds of requests for accommodations. Our special ed teachers are saying, well, they get all these accommodations. What accommodations can we give with the FAST? And the simple answer is really none. Unless it's a visual thing or something, because it wasn't developed through the use of any accommodations, and it's designed to kind of sort and separate. We all have to be timed. If it says it's timed, it has to be standard. You were saying?
I was going to say, and that might be a part where the the hearing department or the Department of the Visually Impaired
might want to have some conversations.
Might need to have some conversations if they have students who are going to be doing the screening assessments to look if there's any appropriate accommodations that aren't going to jeopardize the standardization and aren't going to impact the results of the test, but ways that they could make it more accessible to the students that they serve.
Generally, the answer is no in regards to accommodations. We need to get off the stage, but questions? Yeah.
Quick question. So if the student has an IEP, has a substantial deficit, does the specially designed instruction meet requirements of the additional intensive instruction?
It may or it may not.
Okay.
The other thing is, and this is new information and a little alarming, so kids on IEPs probably are going to be at risk for substantially deficit, right? They get all of the provisions of the law and all of the provisions of gen ed students. So they too will be progress monitored weekly using a DE approved tool.
As well as an additional intervention.
As well as their IEP goals and how their progress monitored. Right now the two are kind of separate. Hopefully eventually they won't be, but kids on IEPs have all of what's in their IEP plus this
You'll want to read probably the special education questions and answers in that document because it is more specific about.
The other thing too to know is that the disciplinary, what's Joey's official title?
team rep leads
are aware of this and are going to be in our team rep meetings and different meetings, so on and so forth, probably going to be addressing some of these. A lot yet has to be decided and figured out. But the big thing to remember is kids on IEPs have all the rights of what's in DLive.
And the department isn't out to get you, and I just sat in on a webinar this morning where they said, you know, to get that message out that they don't have like the naughty list sitting out there and they're just waiting for schools to land on the naughty list.
They don't
really
have the
want this-
capacity to police the progress monitoring.
They want this to be a tool to help.
And again, big picture, the idea is to find the kids that need our help quickly and provide that help quickly. Okay.
Thank you.
You got one
so
card
much.
here.
Thank you. I just have a couple of things. One is just remember this morning when work said it's okay to say I don't know the answer, but I'll help find it. Well, we wanted you to know who some of the people within the agency are